Craig Houston has been arrested and charged. Now, I've met Craig Houston a couple of times. I don't know him very well at all. But Scottish YouTuber, commentates on politics from a sort of right-wing perspective in general, I would say. Details are quite sketchy at the moment, but it's clear that he's been arrested and charged with an online communications offence. So here's a media headline. Podcaster charged after Glasgow Southside councillor targeted with vile racist abuse. Now, people reading that, you would assume that it means the podcaster has come out with this vile racist abuse, but that is not the case at all. I mean, is that headline deliberately misleading? Very possibly, I would suggest. So let's have a look at what we know about what's really happened. So the Glasgow councillor is Dr. Soraya, apologies if I've mispronounced that, Sadiq, who's a Labour councillor in Glasgow, and here she is making a comment.
What surprised me about being a female representative is how pale, male and stale it is. The lack of female, the lack of diversity in the decision-making process. It's been a real shock to me.
So what did Craig Houston say in response to that? I don't know. The video's been taken down, but I'll tell you what I say in response to it. Using this male, pale, stale line, well, I think it's just not on. Like pale and stale, in other words, too white. It's a bit derogatory. White men make for staleness. We all know what white men are like and the way they spoil things, don't we? It would be a bit like me saying, I joined an organisation, everyone else was black. It was a bit dark and dingy. It was a bit dark and dismal. You know, it was full of dark people. You know what the trouble with them is, don't you? You can imagine what that would be like. Would they be racist things to say? Absolutely. And so is the comment by Dr. Sadiq. I mean, a similar illustration as well. If I went to an organisation that was like dominated by women, and I said, oh, it's full of women, what do you expect? Would that be a sexist comment? Yes, absolutely. Similarly, so is Dr. Sadiq's comment sexist. Now, Dr. Sadiq's obviously coming from this social justice ideology. There's oppressed and oppressor groups. And if you're in an oppressed group, then you can say what you like about oppressor groups. They're fair game. This philosophy is divisive, debilitating. I mean, it seems to expect that she should be cheered. You know, I'm an Asian Muslim woman. That's great. Having someone like me, that's just what we need in the council. Not like those boring white men. We all know that they're not much use. This obviously breeds resentment. And by definition, it's prejudice. Prejudice is making a judgment about someone before you've got information. So she makes a judgment on the basis of sex and skin colour, rather than people's competence. It may be that Dr. Sadiq is an absolutely useless councillor. It may be that she's brilliant. I don't know. From what I've seen so far, I'm not particularly optimistic, but basically I don't know. All the white males on the council, I would probably think most of them are terrible because of their political outlook. There's nothing to do with them being a white male. So anyway, that's my response. Did Craig Houston say something along those lines? Who knows? He might well have done. So Dr. Sadiq said that. It's a foolish thing to say, and it's controversial, and it's inviting opposition. People are going to disagree with you. People are going to push back and say you shouldn't say that, just like I've been saying in this video. Now, the story goes on that she was then subject to online abuse, racist, anti-Islam abuse. I can quite believe that, and I entirely sympathise with you. And if any of these people committed crimes in that, I hope that they're prosecuted if they were real crimes, like being threatening, for example. So right, you've got my sympathy there. I've got no time for the people who've been abusive online. Now, obviously, people are abusive to the Scottish Family Party online quite routinely, but the police never do anything about that. But that's two-tier policing for you. Now, notice here, Craig Houston's been arrested, but the people who are actually coming out with this racist abuse, allegedly, have not been arrested. Which seems a bit odd to me, very odd. Just as an aside, this reminds me of the pro-life vigils, where people there have been spat at, had things thrown at them, verbal abuse, milk poured over them. The police are never interested, no one's ever arrested or anything. But this would be like going to arrest the MSPs or the BBC for stirring up the hatred and causing this, these attacks, this intimidation. Never going to happen, obviously. Now, it's interesting with the Scottish Family Party YouTube channel, because I sometimes make videos about race, and it's a very sensitive area. So as an example, a few months ago, lots of people were saying Humza Yousaf's not Scottish. So I made a video saying, is Humza Yousaf Scottish? And in the video, I basically said, yes, he is. It's really unfair to say Humza Yousaf's not Scottish, but there are valid questions to ask about his priorities and his loyalties. So that was my video. Very reasonable, very temperate, and came to a justified conclusion. But then you look at the comments underneath, and quite a few of them, quite a significant proportion, are a bit unsavoury. I would say they're a bit embarrassing for the family party. We don't really want to be associated with views like that. Just people mouthing off like sort of anti-immigrant, anti-Islam, anti-Pakistani, whatever sort of comments. Pretty unpleasant. But that's not my fault. And if some of those people then go over to Humza Yousaf's Twitter feed and say something horrible to him, again, that's not my fault. I didn't incite them to do that. I spoke about an issue, perfectly reasonable. What people do from then on, that's not my responsibility. And the same goes for Craig Houston. Even if he'd said, hey everyone, go over to her Twitter account and tell her what you think. Even then, I don't think he's responsible, unless he's actually inciting them to be abusive or whatever. So we'll see what the law says about that when this goes to court. Now I thought maybe, just maybe, Craig Houston had said something in this video that was absolutely beyond the pale. And when this comes out in court, what he actually said, I'd think, oh, wow, well, he really deserves all he gets if he said that. But do I think that's very likely? I think that's virtually impossible. Also, because I'll talk about the SDP later on. Craig Houston's in the SDP. The SDP is standing by him. So again, I mean, it must be pretty mild what he'd said. Now, when this goes to court, he'll be found innocent or guilty, or maybe it won't get to the final trial or whatever. I don't know. But whatever happens, I don't take the verdict to the court as the final word of judgment on this matter. If he's found guilty, that doesn't mean he's done something wrong and deserving of punishment, because the laws are faulty and the application of the law in the courts is also faulty. So I'll decide for myself about what Craig Houston said, and what the outcome in the court is, well, that's really by the by. That might be totally unrelated to what's just and fair in this case. Well, let's just switch over to Craig Houston's perspective for a moment. I'm sure the experience was quite traumatic and shocking in some ways. But now, and he said this, I was just watching a video of him, he was saying this basically, that this is a huge boost for him. This will become an international story. He'll be seen as a free speech martyr. So it's a total own goal for people who think, oh, this will shut up the likes of Craig Houston. Absolutely the opposite. He'll be standing for election next year for the SDP. So to have this case running up to the election, this is a dream for Craig Houston. It's an absolute dream that this has happened to him. It's going to be a massive boost for him. I mean, think of Count Dankula. He had his court case a few years ago. Now, I won't go back into the details of that, but it catapulted him into international YouTube stardom that he's maintained since then. People love a legal case. It attracts a massive amount of attention. People want to read about it, support it, give money to it, etc. And so for Craig Houston, this is probably one of the best things that ever happened to him. And I don't think he would disagree. Now, Craig Houston, I say, I've met him. We've cooperated on a couple of things in the past, not so much recently. But he is a political rival. He's the Scottish leader now of the SDP, the Social Democratic Party. Now, why has Craig joined the very small SDP? Well, it's because he wouldn't join Reform, because he said Reform wasn't unionist enough. I mean, I find that quite difficult to understand. The way I see it is Craig Houston seems to be splitting hairs with Reform. But the SDP and Reform are very, very similar as far as I can tell. Now, I think the SDP, the image they project is very professional and temperate. So I think Craig Houston's YouTube channel doesn't really align with that. So I feel there's a tension there. But that's their business, I suppose. Because Craig's channel, how would you describe that? I would say it's sensationalist. A lot of it's conspiracy theory, passing on unsubstantiated rumours, but there's a massive audience for that. People love to watch that online. It talks quite a bit about immigration. I would say sometimes quite an anti-immigrant tone, sort of anti-immigrant hostility, which I don't really like. So some of the things he says about immigrants, people of other races, I certainly wouldn't be saying those things, and we wouldn't want those sort of views associated with the family party. It's not like way off the wall, but it's a sensitive area, and I don't like the way he approaches it on many occasions. The thing I'd say about him as well is obviously an extremely committed Rangers fan. And this gets, a mention every now and again mixed in with the politics on the channel. And again, I mean, is that a positive future for Glasgow? Like bringing sort of sectarian football into politics? Not my cup of tea in any case. Now, with the conspiracy theory thing, I've said that. You might be thinking, oh, is that true? Is it? I just had a quick look at his X feed. And one of the things from it, maybe, I don't know, just before the weekend or whatever, he had this tweet here. Everyone's seen the Macron tiff coming off the plane, but why does the stewardess have ripped clothing at the shoulder and a bloody injury? And then that image there. And the woman he's talking about, she wasn't even on the plane, and it's just a scarf. You can see from this video here, it's just a scarf. But this sort of conspiracy rumour, I've got the inside story, there's more to it than you think. This sort of thing, say people lap it up, and there's a massive potential audience for that. Translating that into serious politics, well, I think it doesn't translate. It's a form of entertainment rather than a serious political platform. Anyway, let's see how this develops. But the last point, just to re-emphasise, hate speech laws, this sort of, obscene communications, offensive communications, whatever, these laws backfire. As I've said, I would love to be arrested. It would be a massive boost to the family party, huge interest, lots of attention, lots of sympathy, lots of support. Now, if you'd like to be arrested, it's actually easy to get arrested if you're willing to just go and break the law. That's what Just Stop Oil were doing, or like some of the pro-Palestine protesters. But in the family party, we're not going to do that. We're not going to obstruct anyone. We're not going to damage anything. We're not going to be abusive or threatening or inciting. We're not going to do anything like that. But if I could get arrested for saying something perfectly temperate and reasonable, then bring it on. The police would be doing us a massive favour if they did that. Now, when we were doing our protests inside buffer zones when the clinics were closed, the police were threatening to arrest us, but I decided personally, if they came along and threatened to arrest us, I was going to stick to my guns and get arrested. I was absolutely certain that they were wrong. Why would I do that? Because it would be a great story, it would get a lot of attention for the family party, a lot of sympathy, and it would be a big step forward for us. That's the way the online world works. So what these laws create, and what this sort of police action creates, is a perverse incentive. The incentive is to activists who are seeking publicity for their cause or organisation to be more offensive and more outrageous, because if you can get yourself arrested, you become the story, you get massive publicity, you're all over the mainstream media, and that's exactly what you want. Now, as the family party, we won't do things to go out of our way to try and get arrested. We just do our normal, respectful, temperate, reasonable things. So who will be rewarded by this system they've set up? It's people who will push the boundaries a bit more. People will be a bit more offensive, a bit more outrageous. They're the ones who will be rewarded with massive publicity. Now, I'm not saying in this case, I don't know what Craig Houston said. I'd imagine, maybe it might be a couple of notches more than I would have said on the issue. I don't know. But it does produce this perverse incentive system, and it's not helpful at all for politics. It rewards extremism and promotes extremism and takes people who can get themselves over the line to get arrested and turns them into high-profile public figures. So, hope that was interesting. Stay tuned. I'm sure this story will run and we'll have the details and we'll talk about those when they're available. Right, thanks.